this evening of the approval of the minutes of the April 27th, 2021 meeting. Chair will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any questions or comments on the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes 5-0-0. Next up is approval of the warrant. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, put that to a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Chair will abstain. 4-0-1. Next up is public participation. Board is meeting in person, but we are doing it remotely. I guess I should have read this at the beginning. I apologize. This meeting is being held in accordance with the Governor of Massachusetts, March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, Chapter 38, Section 20. No public attendance will be permitted in person. The public can access this meeting via WebEx technology. Until further notice, the Burlington School Committee will hear public comments virtually only. Meetings are also broadcast live on Burlington Cable Access, BCAT as usual. So having said that, we're at public participation in the section of the meeting. If anybody out there remotely has any comments or questions on matters other than things that are on our agenda tonight, now is the time. I'd ask you to raise your hand, and I think Mr. Kuna will keep an eye on it. If anybody out there has any comments to make, we will give you that opportunity. Nothing, Bob?
No, I'm sorry, there is nobody.
All right, moving on. Next item is information reports. Student representative. I think I see Sarah out there. Good evening.
Hi.
What you got?
Hi. I don't have a lot to give for the report today, but like the seniors just completed their first week of internships, which was really great. And one thing that happened like today was at the May 14th senior night event that we had planned got canceled / postponed due to like the I guess like the concerns from like the COVID guidelines from the Board of Health. I'm not sure if Mr. Sullivan is here in the meeting, but the May 14th event was supposed to be like a senior night for us to like come to the varsity field and like do a little like photos and listen to music and do some games and things like that. But it was not approved by the Board of Health, and so now it has been canceled. And Mr. Sullivan did state in his email that it might be like there's a possibility that it could happen that 1 week before graduation. So that is still up in the air. It is unfortunate that the event got canceled because we all were looking forward to it, but we know that like our health and like safety is like prioritized over it. So that'll be it. And then just one last thing is the Multicultural and Humans of VHS Club is hosting a paintings scavenger hunt over the next 2 weeks. It is in a collaboration with Brent Bataclan, who's a Cambridge-based artist, and he basically paints paintings for Smile. His whole goal is to spread like kindness through his paintings, and so we as a club purchased the paintings in collaboration with the Asian Student Association. And we'll be placing the paintings around in the school and leaving hints and clues on the morning announcements and on our Instagram accounts, and hoping that somebody would find the paintings, take them home, and the only thing that they have to do is be kind to somebody or smile to somebody. So that'll be it. There's nothing else going on. the school.
Mr. Chair, Sarah, thank you very much. I just want to make sure that I stress that I had a conversation with Mr. Sutton tonight. I do think the key word is postpone, so I'm glad you used that word. I don't think it is going to be something that we can't do. I think the Board of Health has been very supportive, so I just want to make sure we're not saying that they canceled it. I think we just have to make sure that what we're planning follows guidelines, so we're working with the Board of Health, and I think that we can have a very successful event. And I also know the state is changing their guidelines on May 29th. So many of my colleagues who I'm speaking with are have pushed their events until after May 29th. So Sarah, I think you might be able to have a better event with fewer restrictions after May 29th anyway. So I know Mr. Sullivan's meeting with the class advisors and some of the officers tomorrow morning, and I'm hoping that we can get more information out as soon as we can. So again, it's really been working with the Board of Health that we're trying to do this, and it may be advantageous for us to host this after May 29th. So we're doing the best we can, and we sincerely want you to have a memorable event with all of your classmates. So that's what we're working towards, and I know everyone feels that way. So.
Thank you, Dr. Conti.
Dr. Conti, through the chair, please.
Yes, Patrick.
Thank you. I was actually on a call with Susan Luminello and a representative from the Department of Education today. So I just want to reiterate what was, I was on the call, Mr. Sullivan, it kind of came down pretty quickly. So we had been waiting for a call back. And so I apologize that he wasn't part of it, but I want to reiterate what Dr. Conti said. The Board of Health did not cancel this event. The Board of Health reached out to the state to help with some interpretation of the guidelines. The Board of Health hasn't canceled anything. They ultimately give us guidance and we make the decision together. So again, I don't want the message in Burlington to be the Board of Health canceled something, because that's 100% false. The guidelines were sent to the state. We waited and waited. They've been overburdened looking at these types of things over the past couple of weeks, with every district in the state looking to do something for their seniors. We were disappointed because I know Sarah and the class advisors and Mr. Sullivan, they put in a lot of time planning for this week. But even back to last week, we were kind of getting a push to wait till after the 29th when things were going to open up a bit more. So again, I just want to thank Susan for the time reaching out, trying to make this possible. Weirdly enough, these guidelines are hard to interpret, but one of the strange things is because this is held at night after school, some of the things that would apply during the school day don't apply anymore. So that, again, there's a lot of complications when it comes to looking through these things, and I just want to give thanks to the Board of Health and Susan in particular for taking the time to try to make this work. But ultimately, when we talked to the representative at the state level today, they were not comfortable with the current guidelines for us to have this event on Friday.
Thank you, Patrick, for clarifying. Anybody have any questions or comments on Sarah's report? Christine.
I just want to add to what Patrick said, that I spoke to the chairman of the Board of Health and to Susan Luminello after getting some messages from parents. And the Board of Health did not cancel the event. It was DESE that ultimately came up with the answer that we couldn't do it now. And hopefully we can do it between the 29th and graduation, but not exactly at this point sure what the format will be. Mark will let us know. But Susan was very, very helpful. She sent me a bunch of guidelines, and I think it will work out. So I hope that helps.
Anybody else? Martha?
I just want to say that there was a question on the BCAT feed that Mrs. Fazio said that other towns are allowed to have proms or something. Is there someone who can respond to that question, please?
Chris?
Thank you.
Yes. Susan Luminello told me that while DESE frowns upon proms, they have not outlawed them, so to speak, or refused to allow them. They have strict guidelines, which she sent me and I forwarded to the administration. So, whatever this event happens to be, there are prom guidelines, and I didn't have time to read them. I got them about 6 o'clock or a little after. But I did forward them, and so whatever they work out, they work out.
And again, through the chair, sometimes the devil of these conversations are in the details. So part of the challenge with prior to May 29th is they seem to have a 150-person limit. So what some of the districts are doing, because we've been talking to one another, is they might be having 3 or 4 proms or 3 or 4 shifts of proms. I think part of Mr. Sullivan's challenge was not wanting to break up the class or limit the participants. So again, I think pushing it till after May 29th, when I believe it goes from 150 to 250, and again, my detailed knowledge could be off, I think would allow the entire class to attend and just opens up some more options. So while, again, some communities are saying they're having a prom, they may actually be having a prom in 4 shifts, or again, so I just want to be careful. It's not like we're ignoring what other people are doing. We're in communication. We're trying to learn from one another, and there are some options that we are looking into, and I think we're all trying to provide the seniors an event that will be memorable. And again, the point of this conversation is to say that we've been working with the Board of Health all year, and we'll continue to work with the Board of Health to make this event possible. So I think that's we are trying.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, Martha?
There's one other question here. I don't know if Sarah knows or one of you know, was there money paid that they're losing? That
No.
doesn't make sense to me at all. So I don't want people thinking that,
No, it's reimbursed if
So
they don't go through with it.
if there's no
They're
event.
waiting.
So the plan is to have an event, but it may not be before May 29th. We're still working on it.
Right.
So people would get reimbursed if there
Yes.
wasn't an event to attend. Okay. I just wanted to
That was
clarify
in-
that for everybody.
That was in Mr. Sullivan's email.
Okay. It was clarified to the parents already. Good. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Thank you, Sarah. Next item, subcommittee reports. Does anybody have any subcommittee reports to bring forward?
Again, Mr. Chair, the only, I guess not technically a subcommittee, but we had town meeting last night, and certainly want to commend Amy Warfield and Bill Byer for the different format, and I think for me it was very representative of the amount of learning and changes that our educators have had to sort of master in terms of what they're familiar with in terms of changing direction, and but I thought the meeting went well anyway. The subcommittee report is town meeting approved the school districts, the school committee's operating budget for fiscal '22, and we have our warrants. If we can, where we are in the overall warrant, we should be getting warrant articles for our capital projects on Wednesday evening. So I sent that link to the committee, so you should have it. If you have any questions or don't have the link, please let me know and I'll resend that.
I'd just like to thank town meeting for their support on the operating budget, and look forward to discussing our warrant articles on Wednesday. Anybody with any questions or further subcommittee reports?
I just wanted to reiterate what you're saying. Thank you to the town meeting for their support for our operating budget.
Okay, item C, Ways and Means. I think I see Roger out there. You have anything for us, Roger?
No, nothing for me, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Oh, yes, Martha.
Sort of on the announcement category, which is, I think of in this section. I know we all received an invitation to the Eagle Scout ceremony that's coming up, and I know typically we had a little discussion about who might, because I want to make sure someone can go. but I didn't know if we wanted to just have a brief conversation so we can figure that out.
I actually have, I've already responded.
You
and
have?
I have a conflict. I have a nephew who has a graduation party that day, so
Okay.
I will not be able to attend.
So is there someone else who wanted to attend it?
Now, it's up, if, I don't know how carefully everybody read it, it's up in Andover. It's not
Yep.
it's not locally, just
Mhm.
people should know that.
And it's June 19th, was that? I don't know.
I cannot make.
I forget the
make it.
exact date. And just from a historical perspective, we typically,
And Steve typically did
we
it.
typically get invited to this, and typically it's the chair that covers it, if possible. Steve used to enjoy going to it because I think he was involved in the organization. But there are some times that circumstances don't allow somebody to attend, so.
So given that you can't, I would just, and
Yeah.
Mrs. Monaco said she can't, I just want to make, I would like to have one of us attend if we
Sure.
can. So I don't know, Mrs.
By all
Bond,
means,
Mr.
if
Foss?
anybody's available and is able to do it, then.
Well,
is
maybe
it-
we can discuss it amongst
Yeah.
ourselves over email or something, because I read it last night,
Okay.
and I still haven't looked at my calendar
okay.
carefully enough to
Well-
say, yeah, I'll go.
Okay, so Mrs. Bond, Mr. Foss is also not available. So why don't you and I just figure it
Well,
out over?
all right.
Great, thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you, Martha. Okay, item 6, coronavirus update from the superintendent. Dr. Conti.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to ask Mr. Larkin to join me. We're going to, again, talk about MCAS. I'll start sort of from, again, from 10,000 feet, and Patrick can talk about some of the specifics. So, again, the state is requiring us to administer MCAS this year, and that is grades 3 through 8 in high school. What the federal government did waive, because the state said they couldn't waive MCAS because it's a federal mandate. What the federal government did waive is the accountability measures that go with MCAS. So the accountability, what is that? Again, one specific example would be typically we're required to have at least 95% participation in MCAS. That would be an accountability measure. That accountability measure is waived this year. They're also looking to just use the MCAS scores as a diagnostic, not necessarily, again, to use as an accountability measure as they normally do. We're looking at grades 3 through 8 a little bit differently than we're looking at high school. High school has some connections to graduation and some other opportunities, but we are going to be administering the MCAS in grades 3 through 8. And is Patrick still there, Bob? I just want to.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, and then the state did give us some guidelines, and again, I'll defer to Patrick for administering the MCAS remotely. So again, I want the next part of this conversation will be about the MCAS test and for students who are fully remote. So Patrick, do you want to discuss that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, we've had some calls with with Mr. Mussman's been involved and in communicating with families, but ultimately our remote testing for both middle and high school, middle and elementary school students is going to mirror the in-person days. So our elementary students in grades 3 through 5 are going to take their ELA MCAS on May 18th, and that's all of our elementary students, whether they're in person or remote. And then the math MCAS will be on May 20th, again, for all of our elementary students. And fifth graders will take their science on May 25th. We've put this out on the last 2 video updates. We clarified that remote would mirror the in-person schedule on this past Friday. And those updates are also available on our website if people are watching and want to look at it and kind of make it more concrete for themselves. The middle school students are going to take their ELA MCAS on June 2nd and their math on June 4th. And again, the remote is going to mirror the in-person schedule. And 8th grade students at the middle school will take the science on June 9th. Again, so that's remote and in-person. Again, there's a few logistics for the people at home, but again, ultimately what it's going to look like is we're going to have like we would have a proctor in person in the classroom. We will have a proctor in a Google Meet session supporting students that are remote. And again, I don't think we need to get deep into the details here, but certainly at the school level, especially through Mr. Musselman, some of those details will be, getting out to parents and so forth as we get closer to that date.
Mr. Chair, Patrick, if I could just insert again, maybe
Too many details, but I know the remote test lends itself to certain accommodations that we're required to give and makes other accommodations more difficult or impossible. So students who are required to have a small group setting, the remote is actually of benefit because they're typically taking the test by themselves in a familiar setting. If the child has an accommodation where the test needs to be read to them, then that's something that we can't do remotely. So we are inviting those students, elementary students, into the high school to a centralized location where we can provide them support. We're also allowing parents to sign off and say that they can refuse the accommodation if that's what they'd like to do as well. And then their child can take the Mcas remotely. So again, the typical accommodations that you would imagine happening in a school setting, some of them are easier remotely, but some of them are more challenging or impossible. So we are providing that opportunity, but we're also understanding that if a parent wants to forego that accommodation, then they can forego the accommodation. So it's a lot of time and energy, and I'm not quite sure of the benefit, but we are doing it, and as Patrick said, gave the dates, and our high school students will all have the opportunity. If they don't take it this spring, they'll have the opportunity. The 10th graders will have opportunities next fall as 11th graders to take the test as well. So I think that's where we would be most concerned would be on the high stakes high school diploma area, and I think the state is providing ample opportunity for high school students to participate in the testing.
And if I could add one thing, we're having the high school students that are coming into the building if they're choosing to take MCAS. Just because for some of them, as Dr. Conti may have alluded to, there is some scholarship potential depending on how they do. So there's no downside to an elementary or middle school student opting out or not or taking it remotely. But given the nature of potential state awards at the high school level, we decided to have the high school students come in to take the MCAS if they wish to partake this year.
Thank you, Patrick. Chris?
So I've seen a lot comments about how we shouldn't have MCAS this year. And I don't know, maybe it's just my thought process, but I think it would be interesting because I don't think they're going to mean much, but I think it will be indicative to some extent of just how much we've lost or how much we haven't lost. So I think it's an interesting measure. I'd like to see the MCAS this year. Do they really go down? Do they not? So I hope people don't opt out, because certainly an MCAS test isn't going to be held against any kid. I'd like to have it as a measure of what happened through COVID. Just my 2 cents.
Martha?
Well, so my 2 cents is that I think that so much depends on the students' motivations. And as you said, we may find that there's declines or there's no declines or there's advancement in the various scores. And hopefully we can use that as diagnostic. But in fact, I believe that the district administered diagnostics that we do anyway, that we've gotten some reports on, are much more useful than a child who's had a tough year and just can't do it this year. It doesn't mean they learned or didn't learn. you know, what does it mean? What does MCAS mean? So I think that whatever the results are, we should try to use the information as best to help us to educate our children. But I don't think we should read a whole lot into it either. Especially if we see kids are doing well, I think actually that's probably more accurate. But if we don't see kids doing well, I think it can be attributed to so many factors. I was teaching long enough ago that I taught from before MCAS, and until MCAS was mandated for graduation, the kids didn't, take it seriously. So how will the kids respond? It's affected so much by the student motivation. So I think we just need to be very careful of how we use the information we get from MCAS testing this year when kids are so worn out, so many of them are.
Anybody else? Questions, comments? Alrighty. Item B, ESSER-3 federal grant.
We were hoping to have much more guidance available to the school committee at this time, but we seem to be getting dribs and drabs of information, and as Nicole said, it seems to be changing every day. So ESSER-3, again, is the third iteration of the federal relief funds. My understanding is those funds can be utilized over the next 2 fiscal years, so in fiscal '22 and fiscal '23. I'm not sure we have a confirmed dollar amount yet, but we're narrowing in on that. Is that correct?
So as of April 14th, the Division of Local Services estimated Burlington's allocation to be approximately $898,000, but that is not definite and confirmed yet. That's just the state's estimate.
Again, I was hoping for closer to 1.2 or 1.4 million, so again, I'm not going to turn away the money, but we have some significant needs. We are having ESSER-3 meetings, and we've just started those. We're going to include the Patrick Murphy from the BEA in those meetings. I think our focus is going to be on family and student support. If you want to think about mental health, we're reading and hearing about there'll be much more, we'll have to be prepared to deal with student anxiety as they return in, and we're also going to be looking at providing supports for student recovery. So there are going to be some students who we haven't seen in the buildings since a year ago March. So I think all of our kids are learning. I think our remote teachers have done a phenomenal job. But I think next year and next fall is going to be interesting in terms of getting kids back into routines. And that was the description today that I just wanted to share with the community because it was really telling. We had an administrative meeting today, and whoever was there can correct me, but I think what one of the principals said that it's like the start of a school year and the end of a school year at the exact same time. So the kids are sort of learning routines, but they're excited for the end of school. And so it's a strange combination. So the energy levels are really high, but they don't know sort of the rules of the road. So I think it was an interesting description, and I thought, Mr. Foss, I'm not sure if you would agree with that or
1,000%.
So it was sort of I just thought that was that's what's happening. But these funds are going to be used for resources to be supporting students. As I committed, when we get the rules on how we can spend it, our belief is they need to be used to supplement the operating budget, not supplant, so they need to be additional resources. We'll present a multi-year plan to the school committee, so it's not going to be we need this amount and this amount. We'll sort of present a whole a two-year proposal or a two-year plan. But it will be, we will have extra resources, and I think we should then plan on absorbing some of those resources into the operating budget as we progress forward if they're needed and critical for our continued growth. So, Mr. Chair, that was an agenda item I was hoping we would have more information on, but we don't. That doesn't mean I can't talk for hours on it, though.
That's true. Any questions on that item? Seeing none, let's move on to BHS math teacher, presidential award.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Burlington High School math teacher Jean DeRosa has been named a finalist for the Presidential Award for Excellence in Math and Science Teaching. Jean will be honored at state ceremonies next fall, and she's being forwarded to a national selection committee composed of K-12 teachers, administrators, university professors, and STEM education researchers who will meet to select a PAEMST awardee, that's the Presidential Award finalist, at the national level. The teachers chosen to be presidential awardees will be notified by the White House, honored in Washington, D.C., will receive $10,000 from the National Science Foundation, and join a cadre of award-winning teachers who can impact STEM education in Massachusetts and nationally. So Jean just brings phenomenal energy to the high school. I know that she's always concerned about not only her students' sort of math performance, but sort of their development as people. And I always see her rallying her fellow teachers and sort of working to improve the culture of the school. So again, very well-deserved recognition, and I just wanted to congratulate Mr. Rosa and notify the committee of her award.
That's great news. Martha?
I just want to congratulate Ms. DeRosa. That's quite an honor, and it's just really wonderful to have you here in Burlington. Thank you.
I'll second that on behalf of the rest of the committee. Congratulations, Jean. You've done the school department proud, and good luck in the national level, but keep up the good work. Thank you very much. Oh, I'm sorry. There's a hand raised. Beth Colburn.
Yes, hi, sorry, I wanted to speak about the federal funding, so if you want me to wait until you get through something, just let me know.
No, that's fine. What do you got?
Okay, we had actually written a letter to the school committee and Dr. Conti about the federal funding, and this was actually brought up at our board meeting about perhaps more robust summer services and whether or not those things would occur at the same time as extended school year. So I'd like to read part of this letter, but just keep in mind, as I mentioned, summer, I hear you saying that these programs might occur over the next 2 years during school, et cetera. So when I say summer, just think whatever enrichment programs you might be having. So the letter said, we hope that the Burlington School District can avail itself to these funds this summer and plan enrichment programs. We believe that any and all support for all Burlington students is welcome after this unprecedented year, and wholeheartedly support such programs. The CPAC requests that summer enrichment programs be planned and scheduled so that all students can avail themselves to any enrichment opportunities. This includes those receiving ESY, compensatory, and other IEP-related services this summer. This planning is necessary to ensure equitable access for all of our students to any additional enrichment activities. CPAC remains committed to our mission to advocate for all children with special needs in Burlington. We welcome the opportunity to support or work with you on this topic. Again, we were kind of thinking summer, but in general, if you're going to make more robust services available to students, we just want to make sure that they're not going to happen, during a time that students will be getting IEP services or ESY. I know Summer Central happens at the same time as ESY, so those students can't benefit from that programming. So I just wanted you to keep that in mind as you develop whatever enrichment you have.
Thank you.
Ms. Colburn, I did get the letter, and I read the letter. There's another funding source that the state is making available, but that is something that we need to apply for that is competitive. I think the state is setting aside $70 million for summer programming. So we have notified the state that we are interested in getting access to that money. I believe it's a match, and the state is going to award that. So we are looking to potentially expand some of our elementary opportunities. And our elementary program exists anyway and has existed historically. That's the 4-week program in July, which, again, that program is inclusive. And so I think we're looking to use those dollars for this summer. Again, I'm not sure the SR3 dollars will apply, but when we get the rules, we'll determine that. And then the summer dollars may also allow us to run a credit recovery program at the high school and a middle school program. I'm not exactly sure the name. Wouldn't be a credit recovery program at the middle school, but a summer sort of boot camp. Again, our middle and high school don't traditionally have summer programs like our elementary school, so it's new. So we're going to see what the interest is, and then see if we can get some of the state dollars to help support that, and then we'll post and see if we can find the educators to staff it. So Ms. Colburn, we'll certainly give regular updates or keep you apprised of the programs as they develop.
Okay, thank you. Sorry I mixed up the funding sources. I just know that Summer Central occurs at the same time as ESY.
Yeah.
So kids getting ESY will not be able to benefit from any other robust services you are able to make happen at Summer Central. So that's my concern.
Right, and
Just want to make sure I'm correct, and Ms. Colburn, please, I get them all mixed up too, so you could be absolutely right and I could be wrong. So don't apologize, because they're changing all the time. The Summer Central is the program at the middle school. Is that, we have a summer reading program that runs at Memorial concurrent to some of the ESY services. There's also.
Yes, I'm sorry. That's the one I'm talking about.
That's the one you're talking about. No, okay, no, again, that makes more sense to me, and we're looking at that programming, and we did receive your letter, and we're going to make sure that we're as inclusive as possible.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
okay, thank you.
Anything else on this item? Seeing none, 6D, BHS Student DECA Award recipient. Dr. Conti.
Yeah, the committee, in prior years, you're used to having DECA students in every spring, and they usually do exceptionally well in their competitions, and many of them have qualified for nationals. But this year, we have DECA Award recipient Thomas Gallagher. So Mr. Sullivan said this is the first time at BHS. So BHS student Thomas Gallagher has been named in the top 10 in the world at DECA International in the entrepreneurship competition last week. So again, an incredible honor, and again, the first time at BHS, and you know, Thomas did a great job. And in prior years, we would have him here, and we would be acknowledging him, and maybe we can get him to show up virtually. But what an incredible accomplishment. So again, wanted to inform the committee.
Good.
Do you know what he presented, or do you have any idea what?
I can give you more details on
Yeah.
what his presentation was.
Yeah, I would like to
can.
know that.
Sure.
Well, congratulations to young Mr. Gallagher. That's great news. Chris?
Eric, are the guidelines that strict that we couldn't have a student come in?
I think as long as we're 3 feet apart, I think we could probably have a student come in.
I think we should have him come in.
I would love to have him come in too.
All right.
Probably a little late. Oh, another night, you mean?
Oh, yeah, no, a different night, but, you know, I mean, that's like, a wow, that's a big wow.
That's huge.
Yeah.
I mean, being top 10 in the world, that's incredible.
Okay, we'll bring young Mr. Gallagher in. So, Bob, we might throw you out, but he can take your seat.
We're
Is he
not
a
throwing
senior?
Bob out.
He's a junior, I think.
Junior?
Wow.
We'll go from there. Again, that's why it's on the agenda. We were all very impressed with his work, and again, I think anyway, there's been a lot of great accomplishments, but it's hard to pick out the significant ones. But this was great.
Okay, next item, school building facilities.
We have a more specific conversation later in the agenda about Fox Hill specifically. So I just wanted to give Bob a chance to talk about the school building facilities in general. This is a standing agenda item, but I also wanted to convey to the school committee that it seems like we have a lot of time before next fall, but the clock in my head is kind of telling me we don't. We are really pushing the Department of Ed for more specific guidance in terms of distancing. That's going to dictate the number of sections we need in terms of creating high school schedules and classes. A lot of our common spaces, especially at the elementary schools, are full of classroom furniture because we had to empty out classrooms to maximize space. We need that space both for summer programming and for school in the fall. So emptying out those spaces, getting the buildings cleaned, getting the classrooms reconfigured is sort of on my mind. I know that's not a school building facilities update, but we really need specific guidance quickly. Getting it in August is too late for us to make it work. So again, I'm not panicked yet, but concerned about needing to know. And so again, we're assuming things are going to be back to a more regular type schedule, but it would be nice to have that confirmed.
Chris?
I would like to make a personal plea to parents, now that the Pfizer vaccine has been approved for ages 12 and up. Please get your kids vaccinated, protect them, and we can all get back to close to normal.
And again, through the chair, Mrs. Monaco, I did receive some feedback, and I think it was actually very valuable feedback, is that they said they didn't want to get that advice from superintendent. I should give other educational advice. So again, I would just encourage families to speak to their pediatricians and go see their doctors about whether the vaccine is appropriate for their kids. But Pfizer was approved for 12 and up today, or I read about it today. So if they could talk to their doctor about doing that, I think that would be really helpful.
Well, if it helps, my daughter is a pediatrician, and she's already got her 13-year-old in line.
Then that's great. I just thought that was valuable feedback, so for me.
All righty, anything else from the board? Seeing none, don't see any hands raised.
Actually,
Martha.
another little announcement. Driving in tonight, I saw that the high school music department's having their concert outside, and it's not real warm, but it's pretty perfect weather to be outside if you have a warm enough coat. And it made me smile. I'm just so glad that some of the events are able to continue. And that we have these amazing musicians that we frequently will commend, and I thank you to the music department. And I know that other departments are also doing many, many things that, they've found ways to do things that are difficult. And I do believe that we'll find a way to have the seniors have an event likewise. But it just made my heart sing that there was a concert here tonight, so.
Mine too, yeah.
All righty.
Mr. Chair, Bob, was there anything else you wanted to add? Are you all set? Okay, so we'll do with that, Fox Hill.
Thanks.
And Mr. Chair, just before we leave the number 6, could I just move the agenda around, just since we're honoring students? It just seemed a little out of place in the bottom part, but we have 9 students. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 students who are recognized for the Seal of Biliteracy this year. And so I know the committee knows, but for anyone watching, since the fall of 2019, Burlington Public Schools joined a national group to test the effectiveness of education towards proficiency in 2 or more languages through the Seal of Biliteracy program. The State Seal of Biliteracy is an award provided by state-approved districts given in recognition of students who have attained proficiency in listening, speaking, reading, and writing in 2 or more languages by the time they reach high school graduation. Most importantly, the program acknowledges the value of bilingualism and encourages students to pursue biliteracy in English and another language. Additionally, the State Seal of Biliteracy highlights the evidence of skills that are attractive to future employers and college admissions officers. Recipients of the award receive an insignia on their diploma and transcript upon graduation from Burlington High School. So we have 9 students who have qualified for the Seal of Biliteracy. 2 have qualified for the Seal of Biliteracy with distinction. And the languages that are included are Hebrew, Japanese, Latin, Spanish, and Arabic. So again, another great honor for 9 of our students in terms of the Seal of Biliteracy.
Can we bring them to a meeting too?
Yeah, I also am just terribly proud of these students because if, in listening to the list, only 2 of those languages do we teach here as world languages. So we have students who have maintained a language that's not being taught at school here or learned a language. And I want to repeat that it's not just being able, like if you speak another language at home and you converse with your grandparents and you can talk and understand it, that does not earn you a Seal of Biliteracy. This is not just bilingual, but biliterate. So these students have also learned and mastered the languages that were mentioned in reading and writing. So it's speaking, listening, reading, and writing. And that's just very impressive. And I think it's just so important in this global world that we live in ways to help people communicate with people from different backgrounds. So I'm just delighted that we began this program a couple of years ago. I know that a number of teachers, like Mrs. Dacey in the world languages, had something to do with it. And I just think it's wonderful that our students are reaching for this and achieving it. And it's really wonderful. So congratulations to all of them and their teachers. And maybe their parents are the ones who taught it to them too.
All paid for the lessons.
Thank you. Okay, item 7, monthly financial update. Cole, Dr. Conti.
Again, thank you, Mr. Chair. You should be fairly familiar with the pages that are in front of you. Again, let Nicole answer any questions, but first page is the revolving fund summary. And I think we're anticipating question there.
Really?
Questions on the revolving account?
Sure. How about the 2 really big negative balances?
Through the chair.
Yes.
So for the school lunch, the prior month deficit was around 247. So while it looks like there's an additional 80,000 this month, please just note that there's been no new reimbursements received. So we're still only received our reimbursements through February, which is the same as last month. So we just didn't get our receipts in for that yet. So it's not growing as largely as the final number there makes it look like it is.
What's the anticipated amount of receipts?
Yeah.
Do you have a rough idea?
So this year, we've ranged around 60,000 a month.
60,000 a month? And we're short
2 months,
April and
So
May.
that's not
Yeah.
going to do it.
Okay.
March and April.
What do you
March and April.
predict the final deficit to be? Any idea?
It all depends on participation and what happens with serving lunches, so,
So the state is paying, are we still doing free lunches?
yes.
And the state's paying, but they're not paying enough to cover everything?
Yeah, so they're reimbursing at the free and reduced rate for all
And that
meals.
isn't enough for our expenses.
Correct.
Any further questions or comments on that item?
Sprouts?
What's the, realizing that we still have to see how it plays out over the next couple of months, what's the game plan once we get to the end?
So we do have some town federal relief money that we'll be able to apply to that because of the increased labor costs and the packaging costs incurred with
Will that be,
the packaging of the
you
meals.
expect that will be enough to even us out?
I think between that and possibly maybe offsetting with some choice like we do in
Okay.
prior years.
Chris?
Is it town money, town relief money or school relief money?
Town,
And they're willing to share it?
yes.
Well, that's great. They're being very good partners. And what about the Sprouts deficit?
Sure. So for Sprouts, last month, we were showing about a 20,000 deficit. We just had some lagging receipts. So this month, we're down to about 3,000 at this time.
Wait a minute, am I looking at the wrong one? Forgot my glasses. Oh, I see, okay, so it's only close to 3,000, it's not a huge one. And will that be made up with the receipts?
Yeah, we're not anticipating a deficit at year end at
Okay,
this time.
thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Anybody out there? I don't see Roger's hand up. Okay,
Excuse me?
oh,
Just-
Martha.
I just wanted to comment that we've been, our operating budget balance, remaining budget, is that the right word? I don't like using, sometimes I use the wrong word.
Whatever's left.
But it's page 3, I think, in our packet, that I've been sort of looking at, that's the bottom line. And in March, I think we were maybe in the 200,000s, and it was looking like, are we going to make it through the year? And it looks like we are, to me, and I'm wondering, because, yeah, it's gone down, but we still have over 100,000, 125,000. So we still have May and June to get through, but I'm feeling pretty hopeful. And I wanted to get, first of all, thank you, Ms. Kasha, for managing the budget and understanding where the money's going to go and planning in advance so that that number hasn't been wildly fluctuating or drastically used up by something that was unpredictable. So first, I want to thank you for that because, and then I'd like to know if you're feeling hopeful that it will last us the rest of the year, you know, obviously barring unexpected things, but.
Yeah, through the chair. So I think that a lot of our unforeseeable costs this year has been able to be offset by some of the relief funds that we received, which has definitely helped contribute to keeping that bottom line pretty steady.
Thank you.
Did you have anything else from a report standpoint as far as the update on the operating budget and the accommodated?
No.
No? Okay. Were there any questions on the accommodated account? Anybody?
What about operations and maintenance? It's down 109,000?
In the
Am I
accommodated?
misreading this, Nicole?
Are you looking at page 3? That's the total operating.
No, this is the accommodated.
No, I'm not in accommodated.
This is
Oh.
page 3 where the operating budget that I was referring to.
Yeah, but
The
so,
one
It's only-
above it is
yeah.
operations and maintenance.
right.
It's only about 20,000 less than the prior month, and that was due to a special education IA position that was filled.
So I guess, are we okay with it? Is it manageable?
Yes.
Thank you.
In the event that town meeting approves the creation of our reserve fund, or whatever the formal name was for it, for the
Accrued liability?
accrued liabilities, in the event we have a surplus this year, would we be looking possibly to put that into that account?
Yeah, possibly, but probably not until July or August, so.
Right.
Want to make sure everything's in and,
Right.
and covered, and then we can have that conversation.
Okay.
One other.
Yes.
Are the stipends covered? You know how?
Yeah,
I mean, it's-
Ms. Monaco, through the chair, they should be, absolutely, and we had to, modify them, a little bit this year because some of them weren't able to run because
Right.
they sort of require that, so, we were running them in a limited capacity, so if, again, there are no surprises, I think we should be okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right, anything else on the monthly financial update?
Roger might want to say something.
What's that?
Roger? He's up there.
Oh. Are you looking to say something, Roger? No? Okay. Your face just appeared. I thought you were looking for something. We already spoke about the Burlington High School sale of biliteracy, so let's move on to the Fox Hill project.
Okay, so, this is the sort of conversational part of the meeting, and, Bob, Nicole, and I met, and we're meeting regularly to talk about, Fox Hill, and wanted to sort of get the committee some of our thoughts and then some of the early timeline that we're thinking. The three of us are doing much more detailed work than we will be doing once the committee hires a OPM, an Owner's Project Manager. Once the OPM is hired, then a lot of the detailed work is done by the OPM. So we have a few things that we'd like to suggest in terms of a building committee and want the school committee to weigh in on those. And then just talk about some early timeline thoughts that we have. Our project doesn't officially start until June 1, you all know that, and then the clock starts ticking at that time. There is a, what's the first report called, Bob? I'm blanking on the name,
Initial compliance certification.
Right, so we have some sort of early work to do, and that's really a signature from, I think, from Paul Sagarino, just to make sure that we're communicating. The next thing is really the formation of a building committee. Some communities have standing building committees, so even if they're not building a school, they have building committees that make all the facilities decisions across town and schools that are happening, so it's sort of something that they have standing. We do not, so we're gonna need to discuss the formation of a building committee. So we'll talk about that specifically in a few minutes. What we would like to sort of put out there is that if the school committee could formally appoint the building committee on the June 22nd meeting, that would be the last meeting in June. And then we could put out an RFP, a bid for an owner's project manager in early July. And then obviously we would have the building committee can look at the RFP and all that other stuff. But we typically have one meeting in July, and what we may do is have 3 or 4 of the OPMs present to the school committee at your July meeting, and then have you all deliberate, and by July 30th, the end of the month, choose your OPM, and then we would start August with an OPM in place. So sort of those are the early steps that sort of I'm thinking about in my head. You are welcome to change any or all of it, but we really need to have, Bob, you said our deadline for an OPM is
September 1.
right, is the end of August, but I'd really like to have the OPM on ahead of time. I think we're gonna have a busy August, getting school ready, and I honestly, we need someone to help with the details, because I won't be able to do it, so, MSBA, again, when I'm saying put out an RFP, the MSBA has a whole selection process for an OPM. They have a sort of suggested RFP language, so the MSBA, again, is our partner in this, and they are very prescriptive. They're a very prescriptive partner, so we're planning on following that as much as we can. So going back now to the building committee, we're thinking of a building committee of roughly around 17 people. The MSBA encourages certain people in certain positions. So I'm going to read down the list. I'm going to tell you what our suggestions are. And again, you all are welcome to throw them out, or you can add, subtract. We can have a committee of 50. It's up, some point, it's up to the school committee to make that determination. So the MSBA suggests that we have an MCPPO certified school, sort of someone representing the school committee, and that's Nicole. So Nicole will be our procurement expert on the building committee. Local chief executive, we're saying John Denizio, who's the assistant town manager. Then they say the administrator or manager, so Paul Sagarino should be, again, have a seat on the building committee. They say school committee, they have a minimum of 1. We are suggesting 3 members of the school committee. Again, you all can pick 5, you can pick whatever you want. Superintendent of schools, again, you can choose whoever you want.
I can tell you're really eager.
No, this is good stuff. I just, like I said, I wish we weren't in the pandemic.
One from a different community,
Not from a different community. You can pick someone else. Local official responsible for building maintenance, so Bob will be on the committee. Representative of office authorized by law to construct school buildings. We are suggesting John Luther, who's the senior building inspector. I know Mr. Clancy really helped us a great deal on the memorial project. School principal, so that'd be David Rosenblatt. Member knowledgeable in educational mission and function of facility. We're suggesting Dennis Villano, who also served on the middle school. He's our director of technology integration. Local budget official or member of local finance committee. We're suggesting the chair of ways and means or designee. Member of community with architecture, engineering, and/or construction experience. We are suggesting Ed Parsons. Ed's really helped us with the Fox Hill and the air quality measures this year. Bob, you've spoken to Ed, so I'm not telling him tonight, right? You've had the conversation with him, so we have asked if there was interest. So Mr. Parsons, I'm not sort of embarrassing you. And then others. And then we were thinking about a Fox Hill parent, a Fox Hill teacher, a Fox Hill community member. We were thinking Ray Porch, who is our new director of diversity, equity, inclusion, and then a recording secretary. She wouldn't be a member of the building committee. Not every member of the building committee has to be a voting member. That would also be something for the school committee to decide. But that puts us, I believe, at 17, if I counted correctly. Let me just make sure I'm not lying. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9.
17.
So 17 with the recording secretary.
Okay.
That seems to be around where we were before.
Yep.
But I wanted to be as concrete as possible because if we're going to have some of those folks express an interest, the parent, teacher, community member, then we should also talk about a selection process, because if we have 15 parents apply, we would need some sort of criteria, or if you want us to draw a name out of a hat or something like that, there would be a selection process. So again, a lot of things to discuss. I will stop talking and leave you all to it.
Chris?
My watch just told me that there are some people in the community that would like a special education teacher on this building committee, which I think is a great idea, because we'll be laying out areas that I think special ed would want to have input in.
And again, this is going to be a very defensive comment. When I said a teacher, I was not making that distinction, so
Well,
if you
maybe
would,
2 teachers, one regular ed, one special ed.
again, that's a great suggestion.
I have a couple of other suggestions. One is instead of 1 parent, I think we should have at least 2 parents. And as far as the school committee goes, if we're gonna have 3, then we have to post these meetings anyway. They're open public meetings. I think any school committee member should be able to participate if they want to. So I don't care if there's 5, I don't care if there's 4, I don't care if there's 2. But it's a big deal, and if the members want to be part of it, I think they should be.
And again, through the chair, you're fortunate that there are some school committees that have 9 members, some have 12. Again, with the 5-member committee, it would be manageable, so.
And one other thing is, having served on a couple of building committees, you will never have everybody at a meeting. You know, with committees this large, you're always gonna get a good group, but not the whole group. So, just throwing that out there.
Anybody else want to throw anything out there? A couple, from my standpoint, and again, having served on a few of these over the years, I am of the opinion that the larger the committee gets, sometimes the more difficult it is to get things accomplished. It's just the nature of the beast. Having said that, I think the number you've identified is very similar to what I recall we did for Memorial and for the middle school. I don't remember the exact numbers, but a lot of the municipal officials are the same because, you know, that was the same requirements that they had back then. For people out there who might be interested in getting involved from a time standpoint, and again, I'm relating back to when we did the Memorial School, there was if my recollection is correct, the more time intensive for the committee was getting an architect in place and getting it designed. Once they started building it, you know, there wasn't much to do from the committee standpoint other than approve change orders or things of that nature.
Pick a color.
Pick the colors. But the, you know, I remember meeting maybe a couple times a month for, you know, went on for quite a while. So it can be a fair amount of time. And Christine is right that on any given night, people had something come up, worked late or whatever. But I would encourage anybody who thinks they want to get involved to be comfortable that they can commit the time that it's going to require, because frankly, it's not fair if we appoint some person who then doesn't really show up that often when we had 4 other people also interested who were able to put the time in. So I just ask anybody who's interested to make sure you think it through. Meetings are typically at night, they're not during the day. And so with that said, once we agree on how many, and Mrs. Monaco's suggestion was that we do 2 teachers from the Fox Hill, which would increase the membership to 18, 2 parents, which would increase it to 19, and potentially a few extra school committee members. So, you know, we're up and around 20 people, give or take. I think we should probably set some sort of a time frame by which anybody who's interested sends an email to the superintendent's office or to Nicole, or however you want to do it logistically. And I don't know if anybody have any ideas how we pick how we handle that part of it? Carol?
Well, I don't have an idea. I was going to ask when the committees were formed for Memorial and the middle school, was there interest by many parents? And if so,
Yeah.
how did you choose then?
Name out of a hat.
Oh, it was just random.
I was gonna say
Okay.
that's probably the most-
I was gonna say, drawing from a hat's probably the most fair way to
Yeah.
do it.
We forgot one category, I think. There are residents in town that are interested, I mentioned one to you a week or so ago, that don't have kids in school, but they're residents in town, they're taxpayers, they live in that neighborhood,
Well,
and
there
they
was
care.
there was a Fox Hill community member
Yeah.
The
included.
one community member,
You did
okay.
put that in there, yeah.
So it always seems like one is, you know, hardly enough, but I understand the need to keep the numbers down.
And, you know, and the reality is that we're gonna rely an awful lot, obviously, on the professionals, both the OPM and the architect, and, you know,
Yeah,
we're not designing buildings in the sense that we're figuring out where the steel girders go. You know, we're just trying to get some widespread input on some of the items, but the, you know, the nuts and bolts are done by the professionals. Martha?
So I guess I mean, the only specific idea of how to select that's been mentioned specifically is picking names out of a hat. And it seems like a reasonable way to go. So I'd like to maybe just focus on that for a minute. Like, is there another way that people would like to think about, to consider other than that? Because if not, then if we know that's the way we're going to do it, then we can put out, you know, an announcement that we're looking for this, 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 and this category, and people should put their names in and say which category they're interested in, you know, that they are a member of.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, no, I think it's probably the fairest way to do it.
Eric will figure it
And
out.
in the categories, frankly, would be the Fox Hill parents, if there were gonna be two of them, Fox Hill community member,
And the teachers.
and the teachers, I guess, unless you have a different way that between you and the principal, you wanna select the teachers, or would you rather do that randomly?
I'll ask David, Mr. Rosenblatt, and again, maybe there's someone with some interest. Just the timeline for people, this is probably a 6 or 7 year process, so I don't want a parent of a fourth grader to think, I'm gonna do this and my kid's gonna walk into a new school. So it may even be a preschool, a preschool parent, or, again, I just wanna put that time frame out there. That doesn't mean people can't be involved.
Right.
And I just also wanted to stress what Mrs. Monaco said, that these are open meetings and the agendas will be posted. So if there's a particular item on the agenda that you're passionate about and you don't make the building committee, you are always welcome to show up for the meeting when we're discussing that agenda item. So I think that would be something. We have lots of other meetings. Again, when there is a design, it's presented to the public. I think I remember doing a butters meetings. We did traffic flow meetings. So there'll be lots of opportunity for people in the community who have some concerns to be there. But certainly the educators, Mr. Murphy, I'll ask
That's David.
how he wants to go, and if there's enough interest, maybe he'll do it randomly from his staff as well. So.
One other question that I had on the OPM, what's gonna be the funding source of that? If we're gonna be putting out an RFP, presumably we're gonna have to pay the person or the company. How are we doing that?
I'm not sure we're gonna need to pay for them to apply for the job.
Oh, not to apply, but I mean, once we get somebody up and running and by the end of the summer, whatever that target date is.
We're thinking, we discussed either a September or more likely a January warrant article for OPM and then design services. And again, the OPM will help us with that. And so that was a relatively big chunk of money, not
Right.
compared to the whole project, but that would be.
Are we looking for an OPM who's willing to work for no pay until January?
Again, I think MSBA has some rules with that, so I think we would need to follow that process. So Nicole, I'm looking at you like, again, it's a standardized process, so I think they would do the application, and again, maybe depending on the timing, a September warrant or a January warrant would be to continue the process moving forward.
Okay.
and
So, Bob, is that you, Bob?
Oh,
So the funding vote is, you can sort of see where they fall. So the MSBA shows two votes.
mhm. I think one for
you-
design and one for construction.
Could you,
Yeah.
yeah, could you read what the votes are so people who can't see that slide know what we're talking about?
I'm not sure I can read it.
Okay,
So the blue is for districts, the green is for construction professionals. So the eligibility period, we commence on June
June 1st.
June 1st. Yeah, and then forming the team, and then the feasibility study. So the first 90 days, we're really forming internal teams looking for an OPM.
Right.
And then after the 90 days is when we engage really the feasibility study. That's my understanding of it.
So it's probably September, Mr. Murphy?
I
that
was
we're
gonna say, I mean, it would seem to me an OPM is okay with coming on board in August and wait until September, but wait until January might be asking too much.
I'd just like to add that I've seen that flow chart for a couple of weeks now, and I don't have any idea what it means. So it says there's votes in there, but it doesn't say what the vote is. So I think, you know, as we go, I'm willing to understand that this is a very complicated process, but to say, well, yeah, there's a vote there, it's like, where and what vote? We don't know yet from that information. So I'm hoping as we go forward, we will get that information, and I think it's an important question.
Yeah.
However, I do think that what Dr. Conti said is that, you know, this is a state mandated process. So I think we're going to find OPMs who are willing to apply. You know, I'm hoping, because otherwise the state has no credibility, so.
Well, again, I honestly think the OPMs have to be priorly approved.
Right.
I just think the 90-day timing, Mr. Murphy, to your point, is probably looking at a September design funding vote, which would
Okay.
include OPM and architect.
Right.
The OPM will help us do that. Again,
Yep.
I think they may extend themselves for that. And then probably a January, I'm assuming a May vote then for
Construction.
funding of the project.
Yeah, okay.
So, so I think those would be and that would follow the pattern I think I remember
Yeah.
prior to.
Yep.
But again, I was honestly focused on just the formation of the building committee, the timing of the building committee, and then the selection of the OPM. The selection of the OPM, I'm going to say, is a critical process because they work for us, and they navigate this complex process for us. So that they report to us. They're our employee essentially to help us get this building up and done, and so I think that's a critical process. They typically do the agendas at the building committee meetings. They would organize the selection of the architect. They would do all of that stuff for us. So it is a critical hire.
Yeah.
Martha?
So, Dr. Conti, do you feel you have enough information from us about how the selection of the various members of this committee will be? Did we decide that we want to have 2 teachers from Fox Hill, 1 special ed and 1 regular ed? And did we agree that we want to have more than 1 parent from Fox Hill?
Again, I have the committee at 21 with your discussion.
Okay.
I'm not sure it requires a vote, but
Okay.
if there's a consensus, I have it at 21. The 21 includes, again, 2 teachers. We'll talk to Mr. Rosenblatt about sort of polling the staff. We'd like to suggest that there be a special educator and a regular educator. 2 Fox Hill parents, and again, we'll send something out to the Fox Hill community and say we'll be choosing by lottery, but they're all welcome to, again, the meetings are open, and then we said all 5 school committee members and 1 general Fox Hill community member. So I think we'll advertise, or we'll try something, or I'm not exactly sure, maybe we'll put an ad in the paper, we'll try it a bunch of different ways to see who's there. I've already been receiving some emails, so
Okay.
we already have some people who've expressed an interest. So we'll try to put that together. And if I remember correctly, there were times if the committee agreed to 21, that if someone does it for a year and they want to step off, then the committee has offered to replace that person as well, because it is a multi-year process, so.
Beth Colburn, do you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you again. I have a child at Pine Glen, and forgive me if I'm not up to speed on the possibility of Fox Hill and Pine Glen being joined, but if that's still a
Possibility, may I suggest that you add Pine Glen stakeholders to your building committee?
Yes. That's a good idea if we do that.
Thank you.
Martha?
So that was my next comment, which is that we never decided if we're going, how we're going to replace, we keep calling it the Fox Hill project, but we haven't made that decision yet. And I'd like to know how and when we're going to make that decision.
That's a next year decision, and the OPM will take us through a design process with the designer. I think one of the things that they'll look at is our educational programming, and so they will have that conversation at that time. But I think in terms of my looking at the process, obviously before there's any design work done, the architect has to know what they're designing and what they're designing for. So that decision would be early in the process, and I do think facilitated by the owner's project manager and probably the architect once the architect is hired, because the architect typically have some programming people that are part of their design team. We can certainly add Pine Glen stakeholders to that conversation at that time. And again, I think that'll be an early part of the process, because the architect is only going to want to design one building.
So I don't understand how that would work, because if the process, if we add Pine Glen stakeholders later, after we've made the decision, that doesn't make sense to me.
No, again, Mrs. Simon, I apologize if I was unclear. What I'm saying is that decision is sort of a decision that's made. I think the OPM will take us through that process, but the OPM
Take us, who's us?
take the building committee and the
Okay.
community through that process, but I
Okay.
think they're going to have to hire a designer, and then they'll start to discuss educational programming. When they're discussing educational programming is when they'll talk about merging the schools, and I think we can have very focused and separate conversations about that, inclusive of Pine Glen stakeholders, because the designer is going to want to know what to design. So that's what I think.
Chris?
2 points. One is, I may have a bad memory, although I don't usually. I don't remember an OPM ever doing that. What I recall is the school committee making their own decisions on where they were going to go with that, and then moving into the OPM phase. I could be wrong, you know, it's been a few years.
I don't think we had that as an option, combining two schools back then, so that it wasn't a point of discussion.
Well, there were a whole bunch of different things. And back when we had Wildwood, we were going to, you know, make
Right.
it this and make it that, and, yeah, exactly. I mean, there were a whole bunch of things.
By
And
the time we got the Memorial School money,
by the time we
was
got to Memorial, we knew what we were doing.
Right.
And at the risk of, I don't know what, something, maybe stating my opinion too strongly, I think we've already had a lot of input. I think we should have more input from parents and neighbors on that, and I think we should make that decision even before we hire an OPM. My opinion only, I'm only one member. If everybody else feels the same way, that might save us some time, but if not, we can drag it out.
At the risk of disagreeing with Mrs. Monaco.
Oh, it is a risk. It is a risk.
Again, The timing that we discussed is having an OPM selected by the end of July. So I think that would shortchange that conversation. The OPM isn't going to make the decision. The OPM is just going to facilitate the process. I think there should be a professional architect and designer included in that conversation. They may tell you Pine Glen is not worth saving. They may tell you Pine Glen needs $10 million worth of work. They'll give you different scenarios that then the school committee can make that decision on before they even start to design the building. And please remember, I'm going to have to stress this a lot, is the MSBA is not a silent partner. They're a real partner in this, and they're going to want us to demonstrate, even the school committee may make that decision, but they're going to want to, we have to use their metrics in terms of enrollment, and they're going to want to have the conversation about of the schools. And again, I think they will honor the school committee's decision, but I think we need to take most of next year to have that conversation. So Mrs. Monaco, I didn't mean the OPM would be deciding. I just think the OPM comes on and then does a lot of the detail work behind the scenes and facilitates those conversations. You have had some of those conversations already, which I think are very helpful, and I think clearly there were strong opinions stated about maintaining 4 elementary schools. Again, I heard those, I was a part of it, but I do think we're going to need to continue that conversation moving forward.
Nothing.
Oh, Mr. Kuna, go ahead, through the chair, if I can give it back and I speak after.
When we had our orientation with the MSBA a few weeks ago, they specified that for any districts that were considering consolidation of schools and did check that box, there is an additional module. So this is more of a general template, but there is an additional module that we would need to complete as part of the feasibility study. And that's when we believe is when that process would take place to consider whether or not consolidation is an option for Burlington and whether or not it fits into the MSBA's and Burlington's combined project together.
Do you remember where in the time schedule that phase was factored in?
Well after the OPM. OPM is one of the initial requirements that we're going to have to do, but it doesn't give us an exact date on that yet. I believe
is it before the 190 days or after?
On paper, there's 270 days.
270, I'm sorry.
270
yeah.
is the deadline of when
Right.
it needs to be completed by. We could technically complete it all earlier than that. So any of these we could all complete. Unrealistically, we could complete them by December, but I don't think we would physically be able to get them all done by then. But these are the deadlines to have them all done completed. So I would believe that it would fall under the maintenance and capital planning and then the enrollment certification, which would put that 180-day deadline. So that would probably put us 6 months from June, so probably in the December to January timeframe.
Okay. So conceptually then, the school building committee is wearing 2 hats to a degree, because the first part of their charge is to decide what we're building, or to talk about what we're building and report back to the school committee and ultimately that decision we've made. But it sounds to me like the way that this is set up, the first few months maybe of this committee, the discussions will be comparing the pros and cons of large schools versus 4 neighborhood schools and things of that nature, as opposed to, obviously you can't talk about designing something till you know what you're designing. So their first charge is going to be to assist the school committee and the school department in deciding which avenue we're going to go in terms of building a new school. And the estimate is that will take maybe 3 or 4 months perhaps to talk that through, or maybe up to 6 months, or what's the time frame?
270 days for us to get into the feasibility study agreement.
Okay. So that's 9 months, right? Okay.
So again, to Mrs. Colborn's point, we can certainly put a Pine Glen stakeholder team together to join that conversation.
Okay. Martha?
I share a lot of Mrs. Monaco's concerns. I feel like we kept saying, well, we'll decide later, we'll decide later, we'll decide later. And now it's like, oh, we got to first get this committee together, and then we have 20 people involved in this process and an extra module to decide if we're going to consolidate. But if the school committee decides that we aren't going to consolidate, then that feels like an awful lot of time spent with a group of 20 people and with a professional OPM, and I don't see the advantage of that. Now, the one advantage is now we're in a rush before the building committee gets started, before we hire an OPM, now we're in a rush. That's why 2 years ago I pushed for us to have the public forum. It may be too late for us to have a public forum and make a decision as a committee, as a school committee, before we put the building committee together, or before we start the building committee. But it's very frustrating to have this conversation, because in my mind, that's the first decision. And what I'm hearing you say is that we could get a lot more information if we do it the way this MSBA module thing is proposed, by getting more information about the state of the Pine Glen building and the educational programming and such. On the other hand, we are only about halfway through the 10-year master plan that we already have that told us the state of the Pine Glen building and the state of the Fox Hill building. So I don't know that we need that. And so I'm frustrated and concerned that we're going to spend a whole lot of time on something that we might be able to decide in the next 2 months.
Next 2 weeks?
Well, maybe, but anyway.
I totally agree with Mark.
I know,
Totally.
and I would ask you not to discount I guess, the expertise of the OPM to take us through this process. You might have your decisions made, and again, I was in those meetings as well. I heard them, but I think we also have to do some due diligence, and we're going to have to not only demonstrate to our local partners that we did some due diligence, we're also going to have to convince our state partners that we did some due diligence. There is time to do it in the process that the MSBA has laid out.
But I was just concerned with the timing of that process too, because if we wait until November before we're really making that decision, that's a kind of busy time of year for people. I just feel like it's waiting too late in the process if we wait until November to listen, and I agree. I think we should make that decision much, much earlier. It sounded to me like you're either holding your hand up, in terms of what's going on with the schools, but again, I feel like we need to make the decision much earlier on than November, December. I just feel like it's getting too late.
First, through the chair, we will have more meetings with MSBA. We've kind of just had our initial meeting and then our orientation meeting. But I do want to clarify for the committee that the statement of interest is for Fox Hill. It's not for Pine Glen. So during the feasibility study, one of the boxes we checked would be to create a new statement of interest for Fox Hill, which is when they would diagnose and see if that was eligible for MSBA project. But
You mean
again,
for Pine Glen?
yeah, I'm sorry, Pine Glen, right? So again, the focus that MSBA made us eligible on right now is on Fox Hill. Secondary would be Pine Glen. That's the additional module that would need to be completed. The OPM, I don't want to say is separate because they're all intertwined, but the OPM is needed to then get into those, not just the process of consolidation, but to get into the process of building committee meetings and whatnot, and everything that we need to get before that process. The OPM, whoever is chosen, whether we're building a 5,000 square foot building or a 5 million square foot building, that's where I think we would need to obviously have somebody who has the expertise to build something that large. Us consolidating or redistricting and whatnot would be more of a local/school committee decision, if the MSBA, again, granted us the eligibility for that or considered us eligible for it during that feasibility study. So this 270 days right now is not the complete study. This is getting us up to the feasibility study, which then takes place. Again, this is a 6-7 year process, and even if we're building for 2, this is 9 months, and then there's time in the middle of planning, meetings, eligibility, consolidation, things like that. So that is a 2 to 4 year window in between. That includes design phase, that includes final drawings, that includes town meeting funding before we even break ground.
Chris?
So if there had been a vote, and I'm just going hypothetical here, if there had been a vote on whether or not to check the box on possible consolidation, I would have voted no. Because personally, I think that most of us already feel that combining those 2 schools is just like not a real good idea. It's just, I mean, I think it's such a bad idea that I wouldn't even be talking about it if I had the choice. A, the school would be way too big. B, there would be way too much traffic in the neighborhood. And I don't really understand why we're pursuing it. I mean, Martha and I don't always agree on everything, but we definitely agree on this one. As far as I'm concerned, this is a Fox Hill project, and Pine Glen will be a separate project. And we can dance around, and we can have meetings, and we can get input, and we can have people tell us how great it would be to change the classroom configuration, and I'm not going to agree with any of it, I'll tell you right now. I think we have a great system. I think it's set up well, and I would prefer, and I do think that the school committee ought to have the opportunity simply to make that decision. I would prefer to drop that ball and make this a Fox Hill project. But I also would like to hear from Carl, because he's a Pine Glen parent, and I would like to hear what he has to say.
So I'm hearing both sides here, and I think that if it was going to be a vote, I would come down on the side of Martha and Chris, because I agree with a lot of what you said. However, I am hearing what Dr. Conte and Mr. Kuna are saying is it's not bad to hear what they have to say. And I probably would agree with you again that despite having these meetings and hearing maybe there's some crazy ideas that we can't even think of right now, and that my mind might be changed, but I'll probably get in trouble at home because my wife was at that meeting 2 years ago. And anyway, I'm also hearing what Mr. Kuna is saying is that 9 months out of a 6-year process and is not that long. So I guess what I would say is let's trust in the experts, listen to what they have to say, and then we'll probably end up voting the way we think we're going to vote anyway.
Couple of, Catherine, do you have anything?
No, I agree. Again, I understand where you all are coming from and listening to the experts, and we can certainly get input on that. But again, the parents that I spoke to from Pine Glen and some of the parents from the Fox Hill area, most of the people I spoke to felt fairly strongly about keeping this 2 schools separately. And again, I would lean towards the same thing too, for the same reasons that Chris and Martha brought up. Not to say you want to dismiss hearing all of the options, but if we have parents in the community who feel that strongly about it, why waste our time? Why not just focus on the school that we want to focus on, instead of having all these outside things coming at us, we should focus on Fox Hill, if that's what we make the decision to do.
Just a couple questions. Bob, if the decision was to combine the two schools, would that require us to go back to MSBA with a new statement of interest that includes Pine Glen, and then have to go through that approval process again?
I've never done it, but my understanding is yes, just not exactly the way you phrased it. Not a whole new process, because again, the process that we're discussing is the Fox Hill. During the feasibility study, we would include a statement of interest for Pine Glen that would then give them the information needed on the building, square footage, number of classrooms, population, everything basically that we did in the first SOI. I don't know the submission process. It may be different because we're already into the program. But yes, they will need to collect a statement of interest for Pine Glen, and then investigate further if that's a possibility.
Okay.
But Bob, it doesn't kick us out of the process.
No, that's an additional part of a process that any other district not looking to consolidate or combine buildings would not do.
Right.
So
But-
can I
but-
clarify that? That we would not then have to reapply for eligibility? We would then still be eligible, whatever the decision was. Is that what you're saying?
Again, my understanding is we're eligible right now for
Right.
Fox Hill, and we've checked a box to consider or have MSBA consider Pine Glen as a potential consolidation into the
Okay.
new building, potential.
Okay.
So at some point, they're gonna want that information on Pine Glen. So during that module, we'll submit a second statement of interest, because you can only have one priority. Priority is Fox Hill. The second statement of interest would then be for Pine Glen, combined in one part of this project, whether or not it meets the eligibility requirements or the funding requirements that they would have for us. Once they do their investigation, ask a million questions, however long that takes, they would tell us whether or not we're a candidate for consolidation.
But we
They
would
may
not
say yes.
lose, but if we're not a candidate for consolidation, we would not lose our existing eligibility for Fox Hill.
What about
Is that what you're
timeframe?
saying?
I mean, again, that's not the intention of what the SOI is to do. It's to explore all options so that MSBA and Burlington combine together to build the best project for Burlington. But if that's not an option to combine the schools, then I believe we would stay in Fox Hill as the eligibility.
I don't think, okay, so,
Would it
I-
slow
I-
us down?
Hmm?
Would it slow us down?
No, I think it's gonna add an additional step in the same time frame that every other district has to complete the same project. We're just gonna have to do another few meetings, a few more questionnaires, a few more reports, a few more opinions, a few more questions.
I mean, you have to put together a video like you did of, this time it was a video because of
Again, if they
COVID, but-
request it and it helps our case, then of course I would. But the video wasn't a requirement, it's just something due to COVID that made the visit happen virtually,
Yeah, okay.
so.
Carl?
Thank you. So the box that was checked, is it possible to uncheck that box, or is the die cast, so to speak? Are we, too far down the road, or, I'm just unclear about that.
Again, we should call the MSB on that, because I wouldn't want to jeopardize what the process that we're in. So, and I honestly think they would be asking us these questions anyway. So,
Question to the administration. If, in the event that the school committee, if it was the decision of the school committee that at this point or within the next within the next month, they have enough information to decide which option they prefer. Is there a downside to that decision being made at this point? Is it going to expedite the ultimate building process at all?
I think those are some great questions. We have don't we have a facilitator at MSBA for our project, so we'll call her and.
I mean, just,
So,
if the MSBA is expecting us to explore the possibility of combining schools, if that was part of the thought process when they approved our application, then I think we probably should, unless they give the permission not to, we should probably go through that process. If, however, they have approved the Fox Hill School and they're fine with just replacing the Fox Hill School, and it's the opinion of the majority of the school committee that that's the best option, so why spend a lot of time and money exploring other options and also drawing the process out for some degree of time? If that's not going to jeopardize our situation with the MSBA, then that might be something that the school committee would want to consider doing between now and say, the end of June.
okay.
Having said that, we probably didn't do as in-depth of an investigation as we had been talking about, because Martha's right, we've been kind of kicking the can down the road a bit for the last couple of years. But nevertheless, there has been some meetings, and there has been some discussion and some talk, and I think we've all heard some opinions, some pro and many of them con. There will still be, I'm sure, people in town who think going to 3 is a good idea,
To save money.
and, because it saves money potentially, but I think whenever we make whatever decision we were going to make, there'd be some people who disagree with it regardless, so that's going to be feedback or blowback that we're gonna deal with, whether we make that decision in June or make it in November or make it next year or whenever. So I think it seems to me if the school committee, and it sounds like a lot of us are kind of in the same position on this, and if people have a pretty fair degree of confidence in their decision, and it's not gonna jeopardize us with MSBA with respect to their process and what they're expecting of us, then it might save a lot of time and money by making that decision now rather than later. And I don't mean tonight, but I mean within the next month or so. So if we can get maybe some feedback from the MSBA on that, if they're expecting us to give some a full study on this issue, then I think we gotta do it. It's their money, we gotta play by their rules. If they are leaving that totally up to the locality, then, and they're gonna fund the Fox Hill School as a project standalone without us having done a study on Pine Glen School, then I think that's something we as a committee can talk about between now and maybe the second meeting in June, and then plan on perhaps making a vote that evening.
Agreed.
Martha?
So, when you explained earlier, Dr. Conti, that you felt that we would get more information and such, I think for me, an advantage of going forward with the way you presented it is that if it would get MSBA on board with our decision in some way that would benefit us, that could be a reason to do it that way. And also, given that, I hadn't thought about it in the sense that, this is a 9-month process for this part, and then we have 2 to 4 years for the next part, that it wouldn't hold us back to wait, to do this I see that as a reason to not make the decision first, but to go ahead with it the way we had checked the box, so to speak. That if,
Although we would be having,
I still feel we would
If
be.
it's a foregone conclusion, we're having a lot of people spend a lot of time talking about something that
Yes.
there perhaps is not any interest in really pursuing.
Right, so that's still my feeling, but if it would help us in our process with MSBA and if it won't jeopardize
Which is
our
your
process.
style.
So those are the questions I'm hearing from myself, but also from others to find out. And that we maybe, at our next school committee meeting in May, be prepared to know what process, if we decide, if we want to make the decision earlier, that we should have our process so that we can be sure to include public input again before we make that decision, which is important to me. And whether it's a forum or whether it's an invite to send your comments to such and such, you know, that would be how I would like to look at it. But I would like to get, I mean, these are questions that, you know, Mr. Cuno, to the best of your ability, you're answering, but you don't know exactly since you haven't been through the process. So if we do have a point person at MSBA and can get answers, I'd appreciate it, and I think other people would. And the only other advantage to doing it is if we found out through that process that one or the other of these projects did save money or didn't. But that is certainly not the only criteria I'm using for my decision-making. So it would be something we could answer, that certainly many people in town, that might be their top priority or may be one of their priorities. So we would be able to answer that as well. So that would be a reason to just go forward with the process the way you described it to us tonight.
Chris?
When we did have that forum, I found it very enlightening. I know there were some people, well, maybe one or two, that were looking at this financially, and I can see that it could possibly save money to consolidate those two schools, but I think as a school committee, it's our responsibility to make the educational decisions that are the best. And I personally don't want to consider seriously risking our educational model to save money. And that's why I feel so strongly that combining those two schools would just, I mean, it would, right now we have over 500 kids at Fox Hill, and approximately 500 kids at Memorial. And how many at Pine Glen?
Roughly 300.
300. So you're talking about, now if you look at the growth, and you can't look at the houses for sale in Burlington without anticipating growth, we're talking 800 to 1,000 kids in elementary school. And I just cannot imagine that being a good educational model. So it doesn't matter to me how much money it saves. I hope that there's no one applying pressure about saving money, because what we have to do is vote for what's right for the kids. And I mean, you might as well take Francis Wyman and Memorial and put them in one building. I mean, you know, it would just be massive. It's just, I don't know why we're even going there. It's just a bad idea.
Well, it's an option that I think we have a responsibility to look at, and we have, because it is a lot of money. But but I do think we have looked at it to a certain degree. So, I mean, I have my opinions, and so, well, not to beat a dead horse.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, may we just circle back? I just want to
Yeah.
make sure. So, again, we had a rough agreement for about 21 folks on the building committee, understanding that if we're going to get into a real heavy in-depth consolidation conversation, that Pine Glen needs to be represented. So I just want to stress that again.
Correct.
Pine Glen would need to be represented. We have identified some people. Did anyone disagree with any of the folks who we identified for the specific spots? So I think we identified those folks. Where we have openings, we will advertise those, and we'll see who we get in. We can certainly keep people updated between now and June 22nd. as to the interest and how things are going. And also in that time, we'll contact the MSBA and answer some of the very specific questions about whether we have to go through the consolidation process or whether the school committee can forego that process because you're committed to the four schools. Again, I'm not stating my opinion on that. I may agree, I may disagree. I'm just saying we would just go through that process. We'll see if we can do that ahead of time or not, or what the consequences are. So we will have a detailed conversation with the MSBA about your options there. So I'm hoping by the end of June, we'll have a building committee identified. Then our procurement specialist is going to use the MSBA process and get a bid out in early July for a owner's project manager, an OPM. We will be scheduling our July and August meetings, but typically they're, third week in July roughly. So hopefully by that point we can have some folks present to the school committee or the building committee. We can discuss that obviously as we get forward, but would like it by the end of July to have an OPM selected. So that's sort of where I'm at.
I think that's all good.
Okay, and they would then really have the expertise and the detail to answer these questions instead of us sort of not being able to answer them, because they would be trained in the MSBA process. And then we would go from there. More than likely, we would need a financial article, but we can discuss that with the OPM and the full building committee. There would be no surprises for town meeting. We would have to see when the deadline is for warrants for September. We may need to put a placeholder on there, but we'll sort of we'll all talk about that and then moving forward. But I hope not too near distant future, you'll have an expert who will be able to answer all of these questions, who works for you, who will sort of shepherd all of these questions through the multi-year process to get the school done. So that's really where I wanted to conclude tonight. I again appreciate the other parts of this, and I think those are important conversations for us to have. Our other building needs have not gone away, so we're still going to be working and discussing sort of high school renovation, and again, if we do end up with 4 elementary schools, Pine Glen is not without needs as well. So I think that we will continue to have those conversations. So anything you disagree with at this point? So we sort of have our marching orders and the rough early timing. And I, for one, can't wait for there to be an expert who is here to answer your questions. And I do think this is a hopeful process. It's an additive process, not one that is going to subtract. So.
All right, sounds like a plan.
All right.
Would you like a motion to adjourn?
Is there anything else to come before the committee? Any old business, new business? Anything else people want to talk about? Seeing nothing, yes, I would love a motion to adjourn.
I'd like to move that we adjourn our meeting.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.
Thank you.